What's up, guys? I'm Travis, and you're watching Upgraded RC. Come on! Come on! Well, next up, the D-bag. Now in the D-bag, this is what you're going to need to complete the assembly of your VFD twin transmission. And these guys want you to go ahead and start with your motor plate and attach your two standoffs to it, as well as the long shaft here that's going to go through the center and attach your spur gear with your slipper clutch on it. Now this is where we're going to make our first modification to the transmission today. Instead of using the stock plastic motor plate, we're going to go with Vanquish's aluminum motor plate, which is a direct replacement, but in aluminum. Let me tell you why this is better. All right, guys, so our advantage to having the aluminum motor plate over the plastic motor plate is that, number one, it's aluminum. It's just a little bit more rigid than the plastic plate, so as we're applying power to this from our motor, it's not going to flex any like this might flex just a little bit. It's not enough to speak about, guys, but it's just a little bit of a performance thing there that I like to do. Number two, and probably the most important, I'm going to have my motor in and out of these holes right here about 100 times. I like to change out the motors. I like to change out the pinions depending on what I'm trying to do or where I'm trying to go. I'm going to have my motor in and out of here a lot. So what's going to happen is these grooves right here where the plastic is, as I tighten down my screw here or my Allen, it's going to make an impression in this plastic. Well, after 3 or 4 times of taking it in and out in different places, it's going to chew the plastic up a little bit. So I feel that the aluminum motor plate here is going to be a lot stronger to be able to do that, and it's just going to last a lot longer. Besides that, I'd mentioned the rigidity of it, and it is also just a hair heavier than this. Not enough to put on the scale and weigh, but I can feel it's just a little bit heavier. Well, here is the part number in the back of the packaging for anyone who's interested. All right, we got the tranny all put together. Now, I did not want to go step by step and explain exactly how to do this all the way through, guys. These instructions here for this section are spot on. This part of the instruction manual is correct. Do exactly what they say step by step and you'll have no problems. Now, there are a couple things I wanted to point out. Number one, on this shaft and this shaft here, which holds your slide dogs on here, this is what changes your overdrive and also puts you into dig. If you put a little bit of grease right here on this shaft, then your slide dogs are going to slide easier in and out with less friction. It does not tell you to do that here, but I did it. I would recommend it. The other thing I wanted to point out is right here in step 2, right after you do the slipper clutch, they want you to install your motor in here. I think that's a bad idea, guys. I don't recommend it. Number one, if you've got your motor sitting in here while you're trying to put your tranny together, it's actually a little bit heavier. It's kind of in the way. And if you've got your wires already soldered onto your motor, it's kind of a nuisance. So you can put this motor in here anytime you want to. It's not a big deal. Like I said, I'm going to have mine in and out probably 100 times doing adjustments anyway. I don't plan on taking the whole transmission apart to do it. So leave your motor out until you're done assembling your transmission. And the very last thing I wanted to say is when you're putting your slipper clutch together here, do not forget this PU washer here. I'm not sure if this is rubber or alabaster or synthetic nylon. I'm not sure what this is, but this is replacing the spring that normally goes on your slipper clutch to keep the tension on it. So all you've got is this plastic washer and this nylon nut here. And when you're putting your nut on, go ahead and tighten the nut down to pretty tight, almost as tight as you can get it, and then back it off a good half turn. And that is what I do for my slipper clutch all the time. Obviously, when you're out there climbing, you don't want it to be slipping. But if you get in a problem, if you like to really get hard on your vehicles and the gears, then the slipper clutch is going to keep you from breaking a gear. So you do need to have a little bit of slip there. That's it, guys. That takes care of the transmission. So here's what we're going with our powerhouse today, guys. We're going with a Holmes Hobby Crawlmaster Pro 540 11 turn. Now, I love these motors. I'm very familiar with them. I've had a 15, a 12, a 10, and an 8. Now we're going to try out their 11. I did the math, and I believe that an 11-turn 540 with a 13-tooth pinion is going to be awesome for this transmission and everything that I want to do with it, which is extreme comp crawling. If you're looking to do trail running, you're probably going to want to go with a bigger pinion. Now, anyway, guys, I know almost all of you out there are probably going to want to go with a brushless motor, and that's fine. It's just my personal preference. I love the way that the brushed motors climb. They're just so smooth. The drag that you get from the brushes is just awesome. As said by John Robert Holmes of Home Hobby, you cannot get a smoother motor than a brushed motor. It just works that much better for crawling. That's what I'm putting this rig together for, so that's what we're going to use. Now, for all you guys that are wanting to put a 550 can into this transmission, I just wanted to show you the difference here. There is 10 millimeters of difference right here, which is going to make this motor not work. Check it out. We got our VFD transmission here. If I try to stick this 550 in here, it just won't go. The back of the motor is hitting on this case right here. There's just not enough room. Now, if you take your motor and you stick the bell housing through the hole in the motor plate where it's going to end up anyway, it looks like it might fit, but this end of your bell right here is going to hit the other part of the transmission. You're probably going to have to grind that down if you want to make it work. The other thing is, to be able to mount this motor up, you're going to have to take your motor plate off, as well as the spur gear and the slipper clutch to be able to mount this up. And then maybe if you're lucky when you're putting it back together, it might clear, but to me it looks like it's still going to hit just a little bit. You'll have to do some grinding back here to make that work. So I'm going to go with Vanquish's recommendation, and we're just going to put that 540 that we were talking about, and look how easy this slides in, guys. And you've still got plenty of room right here for your wires and everything else, so there's no issues. I don't think we need stronger than a 540 for what we're doing with this vehicle, for the crawling I'm doing. This is a great powerhouse. I think it's going to work awesome, and that's what we're using. Well, to supply our powerhouse today, what we're going to be using is a Hobbywing 1080, which is only 80 amps, but that's okay. For the crawling and what we're trying to do, this is going to be fine. Now, this is waterproof, 100% submersible, and it's also got a built-in BEC, which is switchable from 6 volts to 7.2 to 8.4. So that'll have no problem powering our servo or anything else we need to do. And by the way, it also comes with a program card for free. Now, this can program up to 15 different things on here. You can adjust your drag brake. You can adjust all kinds of things with this right here. So we're just going to go ahead and put this $49 ESC in here because for the price and for availability, this is awesome for crawling. Now, after you get your leads soldered onto your motor, if you are running a brushed motor and it is brand new, this is very important. You're going to want to break this motor in. Now, what I like to do is I'll take a little bit of this Royal Purple 10W30 and I put one drop right here on this bell housing and one drop right here on this bell housing. Then what I'm going to do, and I've got it mounted up to this motor plate here so it can't spin around while it's sitting there, but you're going to need to break this in for 5 minutes at half throttle. So what I'm going to do is I've got an older ESC with a receiver in it, one of my Firmas, and I'm going to go ahead and hook this up to my motor here, and then we're going to turn on the radio that is already set up to the ESC, and then I'm going to go ahead and set the radio for 50% throttle, and I'm going to run it for 5 minutes. That is very important, guys. I would recommend that you do that if you want to see this motor last any amount of time at all. What that does is it breaks in your brushes, it seats them to the commutator, and 5 minutes is what you need for about 90% of seating to the commutator. So that's what we're going to do. All right, guys, so when you're installing your motor and your pinion into your transmission, the first thing I'd like to say is make sure that your pinion is even with your spur gear so that they're the same. It's not sticking out too far that way or in too far this way. You want them to wear evenly in the same pattern. Also, I did Loctite both of the motor mounts and the socket head screw that holds the pinion on. You don't want them to come off while you're running. That would be a bad day. It'd probably piss you off. I know it pissed me off. Anyway, after that, go ahead and adjust it so that your pinion and your spur spin really smooth here. You don't want no binding. You don't want it so tight that you're pushing over against the spur gear, and you don't want it so loose that you're not getting a good bite here from the gears, because that'll strip out your spur gear prematurely. Now there is a trick that I've done many times. I've probably showed you guys. You can take a piece of notebook paper and fold it in half, and then you can go ahead and feed it through your pinion and spur gear here. Oops, I went the wrong way. Let me see here. So if we put that in like that and just go ahead and suck it through, I don't know if you can see that, but see how nice of a crinkle it made on the paper right here? Now if that was too tight, it would rip it. If it was too loose, I wouldn't get the crinkle at all. So that is, in my opinion, a perfect gear mesh, and that's what you want. And by the way, guys, I forgot to mention it, but I know somebody's going to ask me. I am running the stock 52 tooth spur gear that it came with and a 13 tooth pinion. Now I do know that from Vanquish you can get a 56 tooth spur as well. That way you can change your gear ratios around and get it just where you want it. All right, let's go ahead and get this mounted up to our transmission plate. Okay, so when you're mounting your transmission down to the plate, you're going to have 1, 2, 3 millimeter by 16 long Allens right here in the top of your motor cover. And then you'll have 1, 2, 3 back here that are also 3 millimeter, but these are only 12 millimeters long. And then you will have one more on the bottom. Now this is a countersunk 3 millimeter by 12 millimeter. Now one thing that's very important, guys, do not tighten any of these up until you get all of them in. The reason why is because number one, you're going to self-center this transmission by tightening them all down at the same time. Number two, if you tighten 1 or 2 of these bolts down, you will not get the other ones in, I promise. The tolerances are very, very tight. There's no room for error here. So please put all of your bolts in loosely and then slowly tighten all of them down in a sequence until you get it tight. Then your transmission is exactly where it wants to be. And make sure that everything in here is fine. There's no binding or issues anymore. Everything still turns freely. At this point in time, at a very, very low speed, I am engaging my dig to make sure that that works and this shaft stops spinning. I'm also checking out the 6.5% overdrive to the front, the neutral position, and the 33 to the rear. And make sure that all of that works and your motor is not rubbing on the motor plate or anything like that. Okay guys, let's move on to the next step.